Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming over. I'm the Reverend Rochelle Stackhouse. I'm the pastor here at Center Church in Hartford, and we are gathered here this morning because the faith community in Hartford, our faith community and many others, want to speak out about what has been happening around the country and unfortunately right here in Connecticut, the rise of anti-Semitic actions across the nation and across the world actually is alarming in the extreme to all of us, and we need to say loudly and strongly that this has to stop. We're gathered here specifically because Matt Lesser, who is a state representative for the last 10 years from Middletown and an active member of the Jewish community in Middletown, has been the victim of an attack ad that has been put out that is clearly anti-Semitic in nature. And we want to stand here today and say, this must stop. So I'm going to have Matt come up and say what he has to say, and then we have a few other speakers.
Thank you so much, Reverend Stackhouse. Thank you to all of the faith leaders who are here today and who have called me over the last 24 hours to express support for me and my family from a variety of faith traditions. I've heard from Muslims and Hindus and Jews and from Christians, all expressing support against this really unfortunate lapse in judgment by my opponent. This was already a difficult week for my family before we received or first saw the mailer on Monday evening. My wife Sarah is from the same neighborhood in Pittsburgh where on Saturday the worst incident of anti-Semitic violence in American history took place. She grew up 4 blocks away from the Tree of Life Synagogue. While she did not know any of the victims, her parents tell us that they knew 4 of the people who were killed that day. So on Saturday we were processing and reeling from this horrific incident, and then on Monday, of course, we received or first saw this mailer. I want to be very clear and thank many Republicans in the Middletown area for reaching out and expressing their statements of support. I want to in particular make sure that I thank Christopher Sugar, Sheila Daniels, Councilman Phil Pacina for their words of opposition and to this type of campaigning and to their support for me and my family over the last 24 hours. I think at this point it's pretty safe to say that there is no question about what this mailer is or what it represents. A spokesman for Mr. Sherriman admitted on National Public Radio that the campaign doctored the image of my face. And the Republican Party chair, Mr. J.R. Romano, has said publicly that the way in which it was doctored is anti-Semitic and evokes anti-Semitic imagery. As of right now, I have received no apology for the mailer from anyone. I've received no apology or comment from Senator Fasano. I've received no apology from Mr. Romano, and certainly we've seen nothing remotely resembling an apology from Mr. Sherriman. As of this morning, a super PAC supported by national Republicans and run by a well-known lobbyist named Bill Phillips is continuing to spend money in support of Mr. Sherriman, even in the wake of this mailer. Maya Angelou said, when someone tells you or tells you who they are, believe them. I think this is an opportunity for us to believe them. The question isn't really who they are. I think the question is really who we are. I have been really gratified over the last 24 hours by real statements of support from across the community, from Democrats, from Republicans, from unaffiliates, people just saying that at this moment in American history, at this particularly fraught moment, we have to come together as a country. We have to reject this kind of divisive campaign tactics. We've got to heal the wounds that are dividing us as Americans. I think it is incumbent on those of us who seek elected office to stand for a different kind of politics, one that brings people together, one where we can argue over policy issues without attacking people on their basis of their race, their ethnicity, or their country of origin. With that, I'd like to welcome up other members of the faith community who would like to speak.
Josh.
Hi, good morning. My name is Josh Pollock. I'm the minister at the Unitarian Universalist Society East in Manchester, Connecticut. It's a pleasure to be here. When I got the call, I definitely wanted to be here to say no to anti-Semitism in Connecticut. I think all of us are feeling, if not fear, at least anxiety in the wake of the shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. And so when an event like this happens, when a mailing like this happens with clear anti-Semitic overtones, it heightens that anxiety and it makes us wonder what's coming next here. I'm also mindful that although we don't really know yet about the true motivations of the shooter in Pittsburgh, we can only imagine that he was swimming in a kind of toxic soup of anti-Semitic online communities and racist online communities, and it's mailings like this mailing that Matt Lesser's opponent sent out that contribute to that kind of soup. And we really need to, in the strongest words possible, condemn it. I think we need an apology. I think we need the Republican Party to say this is wrong and to offer an apology. And I think we need to say no again in the strongest terms possible to anti-Semitism and racism in Connecticut. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Bishop John Selders, pastor of Amistad Church, Hartford, and co-founder of Moral Monday, Connecticut. Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. Those are the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, one of my saints and heroes, and arguably a good American hero. My buddy and friend, Dr. Cornel West, says it something that I want to lift up. He says that we got to be about the business now of truth-telling. And the precondition for any truth-telling to occur is that we center, or he said it best, he says, to allow suffering to speak. Some things are just wrong. Some things are awful. Some things are horrific. Some things are terrible. Some things ought not be.
Amen. Amen.
Some things wrong. What has happened to State Representative Lesser is only a piece of a larger narrative that I think, as people of faith, we have to say something about now.
Amen.
It is very clear that the kind of violence we're living in these times just ought not be. Violence for me in any form is immoral and wrong. So what has happened now, people are emboldened to say and do just about anything in the name of whatever they think is correct. And I think as people of faith, we ought to, for justice sake, ought to say, no, there's a little correction that needs to go on. Because we are, let me steal from my Unitarian Universalist friends, we're standing on the side of love. So Matt, I'm standing with you on the side of love.
Amen. Amen.
Right? This is not partisan for me. It's not left or right or center. It's just what's right and wrong. And we ought to be in a democracy now that's starting to grow up a little bit, that we can stand in the midst and have difference of opinions, have different ideas, have different ways of thinking in the world, and yet be in the chorus. Can I speak to the choir for a minute?
Yes. Yes.
We ought to be in the choir together as one human family.
Yes.
And so I stand here saying this. A friend of mine quoting from Theodore Parker, a quote attributed to Dr. King. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. My friend says to D. Ray McKissick is his name, McKisson, he says this, yeah, that arc is long, but it bends when we start pulling on it.
Amen. All right, time to pull.
It's time to pull.
Time to pull.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Connecticut, a few hundred years ago, was a leader in establishing legal protections went hand in hand with religious tolerance. And today in Connecticut and around this country, we are seeing the consequences of leadership from the President of the United States, who has embraced hatred, who has played on our divisions, and who has appealed to the worst parts of our nation's nature. This mailer that was sent out against Matt Lesser wasn't just an attack on Matt Lesser. It was an attack on American values. It was an attack on the basic principles of tolerance and freedom. You can't pretend, Sharon can't pretend, the Republican Party can't pretend that they didn't know what this mailer meant. The tropes were too obvious, the message too clear. And we, to guard the values of this country, have to say clearly and loudly, it's not okay. The way countries slide toward
fascism.
The way countries slide toward a place from which you can never return is by failing to notice the steps along those paths and draw a line and say no. This kind of mailer is a step along that path. You cannot pretend that it doesn't mean what it was meant to mean. So today we have to condemn that mailer. But I also think we have to say this. You cannot condemn the mailer and not condemn the candidate who approved that mailer. The Republican Party cannot acknowledge the anti-Semitism in that mailer and not reject the candidate whose campaign sent that mailer. This is too important. This isn't about an election. This isn't about a candidate. This is about what we are as a state, what we are as a nation. So today, we have to ask for a much stronger response to this piece of hate mail. The consequences of failing to do that are too clear this week especially. So Matt, I'm sorry for what you and your family have gone through in this week. And for our state and for our country, I hope that we will all say in unity and loudly that this is not what we as a state are, what we as a country are, and it is not what we can allow ourselves to become.
Amen.
Thank you, Mayor. And before I open up for questions, I want to acknowledge a couple other people who are here. So we've got Secretary of State Denise Merrill. I also want to point out we also have a candidate for the state Senate, Norm Needleman, who's the first selectman of Essex, who has himself been the target of aggressive and hateful campaign ads. You know, we're at a moment of choosing for this country. We have two different paths that we can go down. We've seen, I think, in this campaign, lines that had previously been respected in our politics, lines that we did not cross being crossed. We saw that in this mailer. We've seen it in other things. But at the same time, in Middletown on Sunday, just a day after the horrific shooting in Pittsburgh, we saw the community come together. We saw people of different faith traditions, people of different backgrounds, people who'd come here from different places, all rally together in a candlelight vigil from across the community and express love and support. People of different political backgrounds and different values coming in and showing that we are one Connecticut, one community. And my hope is that those values will win out in the end. But this is a real time of choosing for those of us in public life to say whether or not we want to embrace politics where we can argue and fight and beat each other up, but respect one another on the basis of who we are. Or do we want to go into that very different, much darker direction that I'm hopeful we will reject? And you know, I've seen a lot of calls on my opponent to do various things, and I'm hopeful that he will listen to his conscience and to his constituents. But at the end of the day, my real appeal is to the people of Connecticut, to embrace decency and tolerance and compassion and reject the politics of hate. And with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions.
Matt, if you had Mr. Sherman here today in front of you right now, let's say without the cameras, what would you say to him personally?
What I would hope he would understand is that this isn't some sort of political trick on our part, that the feelings of hurt that are out there are real, that the calls that I've gotten from my constituents, from people around the state and around the country of pain at this moment are real. You know, his mailer played on deeply disturbing images of anti-Semitism that have attacked the Jewish people for hundreds of years. And I don't know what process he used to come up with that mailer. I can't speak to his intentions or what created the mailer in the first place. But this is really an opportunity for him to grapple with the impact his campaign tactics have really had on people's lives, and the deep pain that so many people across this state are feeling right now is real, it's tangible, it's affected my family, but it's affected a whole lot of other people too.
Your opponent is a prominent member of his community.
Yes, he is.
Council.
Yep.
He has a business in town. So how does that play into it? That someone who is fairly educated and is influential in his community propagated something like this?
You know, I don't know my opponent very well. We've met over the course of the campaign trail. I did not know him before the campaign. I can't speak to his background or what caused him to do this. I will say that when I first started hearing about this mailer on Monday, I did not believe it, because I've been used to being attacked over the course of 10 years in the legislature. I have not shied away from political controversy. I have well-known opinions on everything from paid family medical leave to college to marijuana. He could attack me for any of those things. I did not believe that the campaign would go in this direction, and to be honest, almost 2 days later, I still don't quite believe that it went where it went. I am shocked. I'm used to a lot of things. I am shocked by the direction he chose to take the campaign.
Are you surprised at Mayor Amato's initial reaction to the mailer?
You know, I think we've become used to. Yes, I am shocked by his reaction. I am, I guess, happy that he is seeing what the rest of us saw at first glance, that it is in fact hate mail directed at me, and he has said it is anti-Semitic. I'm disappointed that he hasn't gone the further step and denounced the man who put it out. I have still not received any call from him or any sort of indication that this kind of campaigning has no place in our politics.
Do you think his statement's genuine, the one he put out last night?
I don't talk about people's motives. I can't speak to why he initially doubled down on the hate mail and then walked it back a few hours later. You'd have to ask him.
Is an apology enough?
No, I think there are wounds that have been opened in our state that I think are real, that there's been some real damage to the fabric of our society. I don't know that an apology would be enough, but it would be a place to start. And certainly there's been, as of right now, no start.
What do you make of the fact that his treasurer, who has handled some of the finances and some of the campaign records, some of the direct mail stuff, make of the fact that he's Jewish?
You know, it's a strange world we're in, right? I don't know what to make of that. I do know how people who have looked at that mailer have reacted, and they've reacted by saying that it evokes centuries of anti-Semitism. And I think his own treasurer admitted that the campaign doctored the image in a particular way, and I think that is shocking in a way that I'm still working to process.
Do you think the mailer should disqualify him from public office?
No.
Can you speak to those specific incidents?
I have not. No, I mean I've been in public life for 10 years now, and I've received nothing but people have voted for me and voted against me for a variety of reasons, but I've never felt that my background is an issue. I think the great thing about Connecticut and this country is that we embrace people from all over the place. Whether your family came here on the Mayflower or in the belly of a slave ship, however your family came here. My grandmother was a refugee. My mother is an immigrant. My grandmother fled the Holocaust. But this state has been welcoming and embracing of people from a variety of different backgrounds. That's who we are as a state, and that's why the politics of today, the rhetoric coming from our national leaders, but this particular mailer in particular is so shocking and so harmful because it's such an aberration from where we've been.
Is it even remotely possible that this candidate and the people who put together this flyer are culturally and historically ignorant?
No, they're clear. There's a clear. I don't know whether it's malevolence or ignorance, but right now, 2 days later, one would hope that this would be an opportunity to learn about the impact that they are having on people's lives and the hate.
My point was, we just had a network correspondent defending blackface on national television because she was culturally ignorant or something. She didn't understand the history, so she had a panel of people explain it to her on the television. You don't think it could possibly be something like that?
I think it's been explained to my opponent plenty of times over the last 24 hours, and if he didn't understand it when he sent it out, one would hope that he would understand it now. I guess he doesn't. I don't know what else to say to that.
Do you really think this ad is an aberration, or do you think it's a sign of political climate today, and there's we'll see more of this?
Well, I think maybe Mr. Needleman could comment on that. I would just say that I've been attacked a lot of times over this campaign. There have been a ton of attacks going on against me. They are continuing right now. If you go open up a computer in Middletown right now, you will see negative ads that the Super PAC is buying right now at this moment in support of Mr. Sherman and against me. After the mailer hit on Monday, on Tuesday, the Super PAC sent out yet another mailer. We have yet to see what it says, but they reported it to the State Elections Enforcement Commission. So as far as we can tell, this level of vitriol continues. The Republican Party continues to support Mr. Sherman's candidacy, and they're doing so with a whole bunch of different tactics. I haven't seen anything quite like this mailer. It stands apart from everything else, but certainly the level of vitriol this year exceeds anything I've ever seen before.
The mailer was sent by his campaign. It wasn't sent by the Super PAC.
Right. This is direct from the mailer that we're talking about is direct from my opponent.
Do you think Ed Sherman should drop out of the race?
I think that's up to I think that's up to him. I think that.
What would you like?
What I would like at this point is not possible. I'd like to undo the painful and unfortunate decision that he made, the lapse of judgment that he made in sending out a hurtful mailer that has disparaged and caused a lot of pain for a lot of people in the Jewish community and outside of the Jewish community. I think I don't know if there's a way to undo the pain that his actions have caused, but I hope that he does some soul searching and tries to find some way of remedying it. As of right now, I don't see any indication that he's interested in doing that.
So do you or anyone else here believe then that mailer and the follow-up should be a disqualifier for public office for your Republican?
I believe it's a disqualifier for public office. I think voters members of the public who look at that and look at that kind of campaigning are rightly repelled by it. I've heard from people who disagree with me on every matter of public policy who are voting for me on Tuesday because they find it abhorrent. And I think that is the right reaction. I think whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or a Green Party member or a Libertarian, you stand for right and not wrong. And I think this mailer is just simply wrong.
Both you and your opponent are publicly funded, and given that this mailer came from his campaign, ostensibly public funds were used to send this mailer. Do you find issue with that? Do you think there should be any sort of strict or more strict standards placed on what public funds can be used for?
It's unfortunate that the mailer is paid for by public funds. I would oppose the mailer if it were paid for by private funds too. I think it's simply wrong. It has no part in our politics to use a mailer like this. I think that is deeply offensive and would be regardless of how he paid for it. Thank you.